Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Matt Callihan with Tri-City Equity Group. With me today is my co-host, Vince Gethings.
Hey, Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome. We got a good show today. Today we have a special guest on the show, Venkat Avasarala. Venkat is the founder of Raven Multifamily. He has 2,918 units, just shy of $250 million. Venkat has a master's in electrical engineering from the University of Alabama at Huntsville and has worked in IT for 14 years for several Fortune 500 companies like PepsiCo, Halliburton, and Bank of America. He's amassed this large portfolio in just under a decade of investing in multifamily.
All right, Matt, I'm super excited to have Venkat on the show. You know, he scaled from zero to almost 3,000 units in under, I think it was like 6 years. When we starts telling his story, just the exponential growth that he was able to achieve through multifamily investing, and some huge points. You're going to talk about what he finds in how he found his partner, some awesome insight on going from B and C class repositions to starting ground up construction, which is a huge step that we don't see often in this space. So to see him talk through his process of going through that is absolutely valuable for us and our listeners, as well as a lot of the tips and tricks he gives us on expenses and ways to find income, these little tricks, even stuff that I haven't even thought about in some of our operations. So it's an absolute awesome show. We're so grateful to have somebody of his caliber on our show and adding value to us and our guests.
Venkat is the co-founder and principal of Raven Multifamily, which is a powerhouse with a current portfolio of 2,918 units, valued at just shy of $1 billion. Venkat has several years of experience in strategic acquisitions and overseeing of operations of large multifamily assets. He has a background in IT with a master's in electrical engineering from UAH. He has worked 14 years in IT at several Fortune 500 companies such as PepsiCo, Halliburton, Bank of America. And Venkat's last corporate job was as an SVP in Global Transformation and Operations with the Bank of America. Since 2006, Venkat lives in Plano, Texas with his family. Venkat, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to talk to someone with your resume. So I just want to roll into the questions real quick. You have an IT background, so how did you get into multifamily?
So yes, I started my IT career back in 2004. My first job was in Roseland, New Jersey at ADP. It was good. And then subsequently, as I'm working, 2004 is a great period, right? We were just coming out of the recession, and they were in the process of raising interest rates. It's euphoria everywhere. So it went well. And then 2008 came along. And one day I was here in Texas in Plano. I drove myself to office. And to my surprise, I see a lot of emergency services there. A lot. And this is a Fortune 500 company. So when we went there, and I was like, I didn't know what to think. It's like, what's going on? So I just parked and started walking in my way. And then eventually learned by the end of the day, bits and pieces, that particular company is actually laying off a lot of people, right? The big headcounts. And unfortunately, these are their employees who've been with them for some of them, a good portion of them, has been working with them for 30 years. They got out of the college and they joined that company, and that's it. That's all they do, right? And these people are fainting, crying, and that kind of situation, which I have never seen in my life. I never seen anything like that, and that freaked me out. And then it began to think that 2008 is a rough time, right? It's actually October of 2008 to be accurate. So that is when these layoffs and all that come because of that great recession we had back then. And then it dawned upon me, it's you know what? I was 28 years old, and I figured that, you know what, every day is not Sunday. Every day it's not going to be hunky and dory. And I'm realizing to that fact, right? Growing up in India, I don't even know what recession means. It's a pretty stable and slow economy there, no huge ups and downs there. And my dad used to work for government, so never felt how a recession will be, right? So then I came here, went to master's, and my first 4 years career, I have never seen any recession. Everything is good. And then it dawned upon me that, you know what, how it's going to be, right? So there's the booms and busts and all that. And you have to you can only pray that you don't retire in a bust economy where you don't have nothing to retire to, right? And then I see these people who work there for 30 years. They don't know any other IT skill than what they're doing. Pretty much by now it's outdated. So they're not marketable. Their skills are not marketable. What are they going to do? So that weighed heavily upon me. And I told myself, I promised myself, that is not going to happen to me, you know? I'm going to do everything possible. And my mind initially went, you know what, I'm going to be one step ahead. I'm going to improve my skills and all that. It's like, no, then I see even very skillful persons are also getting laid off. I said, well, you know what, I need some diversification in my income. So that is when my mind went into passive income. No, I cannot do two jobs. I can only still do one job. So the next source of the income has to be passive. So that is my mind went, and I ended up getting single-family homes, 20 single-family homes, and they were paying me about $400 a year, $400 a month after PITI and maintenance. So that's a good $8,000 cushion. It took me about 4 years to build that. So 2008 was a rude awakening. So 2008, no, actually, it took until 2014. So it took me like 2008 all the way to 2014 to build that portfolio of 20 houses, to bring that income. And then I felt a lot secure, right? Even if I get laid off tomorrow, or, you know, my mortgage gets paid, I don't have to disconnect Netflix, and, you know, the power stays on. I mean, it doesn't alter my life in a big way at that point. And oh my God, I was like, okay, mission accomplished kind of thing. But then again, you know, I thought that, you know what, can we try with $9,000 or $8,000 a month? Can we go travel the world and all that? No, I mean, that's good for sustenance, but, you know, you cannot thrive with that. And God forbid if I get sick, you know, where I need to spend a lot of money, I mean, $8,000 ain't cut it. So then I kept my pursuit on passive income, right? And then I looked at different owner absentee businesses and all that, like, kid you not, you know, I looked into salons, laundromats, 7-Elevens, everything. And they ain't nothing passive about them, right? If the employee doesn't show up, you got to go there in the middle of the night, right? So, which I can't because I got a day job and I just can't. So then I came back to multifamily and then started syndicating the properties. And then I partnered with somebody. So it would really, really help out to get yourself a great partner who can complement your skills, because I'm not kidding myself saying that I'm good at everything. I'm just not. I suck at certain things like terribly. So that is why you need a partner where you complement each other, and as a team, you're good at everything, right? So that is what I did, and end up acquiring about like a little shy than 3,000 units in about 3.5 years. And we raised, for that purpose of multifamily, acquiring the existing B and C class multifamily, we raised about $66 million, and we raised another close to $14 million on other 3 projects that we are doing. They're all ground-up development projects. So that's my story.
It's kind of traumatic. You know, people have similar stories, but I've never heard anyone show up to work. Emergency services are there. Everyone's just kind of filing out of the building, long face.
Yeah.
That's intense.
You did say, I want to touch on something, a couple key points there that I thought were just golden nuggets that I'm going to do this in the show notes, but I need to do it now too. So you mentioned these people that worked 30 years because they were working on an operating system that doesn't exist anymore, right? That's, you know, industrial age operating system. You work for 30 years, you retire, you get a pension.
Mainframes.
World
to be exact, mainframes.
The world we live in is you need to be constantly learning. You need to constantly be adapting. You need to constantly bettering yourself because you're going to be obsolete. And most of the jobs these days, they only have like a 10, 15-year lifespan before some kind of technology comes and makes them obsolete. So you can't just bank on, I'm going to go get a degree and I'm going to get a nice job as an accountant and I'm good. I'm set for 30 years. Because somebody can come up with an algorithm and make you obsolete very quickly. Like, you know, some 20-year-old kid like, hey, I automated QuickBooks. You're not needed anymore. QuickBooks does everything by itself, has AI, you know what I mean? And then also, what are you going to do? You're not marketable, and now could be 50 years old, and now you're like, what am I doing? I got 10 more years till retirement, and I need to do something. So always be learning, always be adapting, and looking for ways to improve yourself and your marketability. And then also, I thought it was fascinating that you went down the franchise, and this is what I see a lot as well. People go down that franchise route because they are very attractive. Some of these franchises out there, you see people like Chick-fil-A's and whatever. The 7-Eleven's a big one, and that there, like you said, there's nothing passive about it. If your employees don't show up, you're the employee. Like, you're going there, you're at the register, and I thought that was a good point as well. And then also the partners, you want to find partners that complement your weaknesses. I think a lot of people focus really hard on improving their weaknesses rather than finding a partner that has the same morals, values, ethics, and timelines that you do, and goals that you do, that likes doing the things you don't like to do and is good at doing the things that you're not good at. And I think for our team, we found some good partners, like our partner Duke. He's really good on that investor relations and doing the marketing and stuff like that. And that I don't like doing any of that. I like operating. I like my hands on, getting dirty in the operation. So absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and the one thing that's never going to be obsolete is a place to live. No one's going to ever outsource, a place to lay your head at night. So multifamily is the way to go. So this whole time that you were investing in property, you were still working in IT, right?
No, actually, we bought our first property in June of 2016. In July of 2018, both me and my partner walked away from our $200,000 plus jobs. So in 2 years, we got it done. And we made a promise to each other that, especially my partner, he has kids and everything. At least I don't have kids. I have my two dogs who are like my kids. But, more responsibilities, right, when you have kids. But we made a promise to ourselves that, look, we're going to get this thing in 2 years. We got to be able to be financially independent. Whether we actually leave the job is a separate thing, but we should no longer depend upon the job. And when will that happen? If I can live today at $200,000 salary, if I can make that $200,000 elsewhere without me showing up for work every single day, then I'm financially independent. It's not about getting rich at all. It's about financial independence. So that tomorrow, if I get laid off, I'll be okay, right? So with that in mind, we were not saying, okay, you know what, let's going to quit our jobs. I loved my job. They treat me well. I worked at Bank of America, and oh my God, I loved it. It was a blast. But in July of 2018, both me and Ramna, my partner, we walked away from our jobs only because we're out of the bandwidth now, because we're raising millions and millions, tens of millions of money, and I don't want to do that part-time. Right? I want it to be my main focus. People are trusting me with their hard-earned money. And initially that's okay. We always use third-party management, but still, there's a lot that I have to do. And then we realized, you know what? We got to take it much, much more seriously than what we are taking it today, because it's people's retirement that we are playing with here. So that is when we decided that, let's walk away from our jobs. So in July of 2018, we both resigned. So it's coming up 2 years since I walked away from my IT job.
Nice. So the goal ultimately then was, once I replace my income, I'm out of here. I'm going full time.
You go.
I think that's hard for a lot of people that are high income earners that want to get into real estate. Passive, but full time, like you said, third party management. You have to manage them. But for me, the big appeal is I could pull up a laptop anywhere in the world and kind of get it done.
There you go. It's all about leveraging other people's time. We are already using other people's money to acquire these properties, but you have to know how to leverage other people's time so that we don't run out of that time to do great things. And of course, you need to have processes, procedures, routines in place so that you measure your KPIs and all that. You run a tight ship. But no matter, don't let anybody tell you that we got to do everything with our own hand. It's just, we'll accomplish a lot little in this life if that were the case.
Yeah. I want to circle back because you said you went from 20 single family homes to 3,000 just about units in, you said 3 years?
3.5 years, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that that's uncommon. That's amazing. Scale that quickly. You talked about raising millions of dollars. What are some of the skills and tips and tricks you have for going out and raising that sort of capital?
Absolutely. So here's the thing, guys. I'm born and brought up in India, and in South India especially, we invest a lot in education, right? We don't believe, at least, at that time when I was growing up in 80s and 90s in India, I mean, there's no other way. You got to go to school, right? There's no investment group. There is no meetup.com. There's nothing, right? So I grew up with a very academic state of mind, right? So I wouldn't trust myself in the decisions I'm making unless I learn it from somebody who has done it so many times over decades, right? So I was looking for a mentor, actually, and I found one in Dallas. It was a good mentor. So basically, I learned everything, the basics, right? I mean, by the time I went to this gentleman, I didn't even know what NOI means. And this is 2015, right? So I went there, I learned everything, networked with the like kind of people. And I have no idea that I would be buying 3,000 units, a $250 million portfolio in 3.5 years. I mean, my goals were very humble, right? What can I do to replace my income is all I'm looking at. Wasn't really thinking big, but all the network, the education that I have received prepared my mind more, so that I don't limit it to myself. I don't limit myself. Let me give you an example. Well, I didn't close any unit, any properties, and I didn't partner with anybody. So what I'm looking at is these 16 units and all that, right? 16 units, 8 units, try to grow from there, right? Because your funds are limited. Everything is limited. Your mind is limited. But when you go into these, mentorship programs and networking programs and all that, you talk to 100 different people, and you saw like a couple of guys buying a 200-unit property on the first property. Oh, so I don't need to do an 8-unit. Okay, I can syndicate, right? So it opens up your mind, and that's what happened to me. I found my partner, my mind got bigger, and we just did one after another. We acquired 12 properties in 3 different states. We sold a few. We have 9. We are holding 9 properties. They are all in Dallas. Thank God. So right now we are all in Dallas. We're still holding 2,600 units, and we did really well on the 3 properties that we sold as well. So there's no magic sauce to it. It's just that networking, right? I mean, talking to people, see what's going on, what you're doing, so that, and inch by inch, changing your mindset and head in the right direction. That's all I could say. There's no special magic sauce here.
Yeah, I love that. I think this is certainly an industry that's heavily based on relationships. And I love what you said. Just quickly, you ramped it up to huge properties. The scalability of multifamily really makes that something that is attractive to real estate investors. So real quick, before I punch it to Vince, could you tell me about the most recent deal that you did, how you found it, how you structured it?
Sure, definitely. In December is the last existing C-class property we have bought. It's been almost 6 months, 6.5 months. Well, 6 months now. So that was a 254 unit in Dallas, built in 60s, a lot of meat on the bone. But we found it through a broker. It was an off-market property. So we got it through our broker, and it's just a typical execution. I mean, when I closed my very first property, a 100-unit property in Norman, you wouldn't believe. I felt like, oh my God, right? It was so awesome, the feeling. But then I think after you do a few of these, you get dull, right? You don't get the same rush of dopamine or whatever in your head, right? You get,
I hope not.
You build. Right. So, I mean, it was nothing great to talk about there. It's a great product that we got in, and we project about 15 IRR. And still with the COVID and all that, we're holding up decent on that particular property, right? So it's a typical, nothing great to talk about other than that we found it through a broker, and it's we assumed the loan actually. It's a Fannie Mae loan. We assumed that, pretty straightforward. The raise was not too much, about $6 million, so it was easy. So that's that. But at the same time, in March, actually, we ended up closing it in March. We are developing a 156-unit apartment complex in Princeton, Texas, which is a suburb of Texas. It's still in Collin County, which is about 7 miles east of McKinney, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. So that we are doing with a JV, with a developer, because we don't have that development background. We didn't go to school for it, nothing. So eventually we'll become our own developers. But right now we're in the mode of actually partnering with developers and doing these joint ventures. But at that particular project, we were introduced to these developers, went back and forth for like 6 months, whether to be involved on that property or not, because there's so many things we don't know, and you have to approach things extra cautiously when this is an uncharted terrain for you, right? So got to talk to different people. So it took a while, but it came to fruition in March, just after COVID broke out, right? So we closed on the land in March, and in May, actually late May, we closed on the construction loan. So we are in the process of excavation there.
That's
so
exciting.
What was your thought process or questioning process of yourself that transitioned you from the BC class value add typical mold that we see into developing? Because that's not a small step or an easy step. I don't see that very often. Actually, you're the first person that we're speaking to that is doing this on a large scale, that is going from B class or A class asset to a ground up construction. So can you tell us about like what was going on and what was that thought process?
Most definitely, right? So when I started single family homes, right? So in Dallas area, we were lucky enough to able to buy properties which yield 1% rent. Well, what is it? Let's say you're paying $150,000 a property, you get $1,500 rent or thereabouts, right? So that will ensure that you pay your taxes, insurance, PITI maintenance, and still there is something end for you. And when I got started back in 2008, I used to sometimes get close to 2% rent, right, on a house, not just an apartment, but on a house. But at the time, apartments were getting 3 times the rent, right? Let's say you buy something with a $25,000, a C-class property, you're getting $750 rent, right, in certain areas. So that is really, really important, right? The percentage of the rent, monthly rent that you collect, kind of tells you a lot on how well you're going to do that in a particular property. So by the time in 2016, when my very first property was in Norman, Oklahoma, just 2 miles from OU, from Oklahoma University there, we paid $35,000 a unit, and our average ones were like 600, north of 600. So good, 1.75%. So we did well. We projected and we delivered 17% IRR for our investors once we sold that property. And similar, right? Our second property, we paid about $65 a door in a Carrollton property, and we ended up selling at $95, but our rents were like $850. So we were cash flowing like crazy, and same thing with our Arizona property. But then later what happened is, if you see all these Sunbelt states where we want to be, where we want landlord friendliness, business friendliness, and where the jobs are coming, migration is happening, everybody wants the same thing, right? So they bidded these properties to insane levels, something which traded for $25 a door, traded $100 a door, 7-8 years apart. That's not a big enough cycle. That's one cycle, right? It's not like over the 2-3 cycles, if you see that kind of appreciation, okay, that makes sense. But in one cycle, how can you start at $25 a door and trade at $100 a door? It's just too much. Rents haven't kept up, right? Rents did not grow at that rate. So what happens is now, if I look at any C-class property in a decent area, I'm not worried about buying a C-class property, but it has to be in a decent area where it's not crime-ridden and crazy stuff going on and all that. So if you want something like that, people are still asking 5.5 cap. When I started investing in multifamily back in 2016, 7.5 cap for a C-class product. Now it's 5.5, right? So cap rates got compressed. Rents didn't keep up. So what's happening is the chances of you able to make your projections are under risk now, right? And also you have to see your insurance. When I started, it was $250 a door. Now it's like $600 a door. Your taxes, a huge increase, right? A huge increase. And especially this year, Dallas County, Tarrant County, everybody dropped their cap rates by 200 basis points to catch up to the market. And thanks to COVID, we're in big trouble right now to fight off these counties with that assessment. And then you look at payroll. Thanks to this 3% unemployment out there, payroll rates went up. right? So we cover taxes, insurance, payroll, energy. If you look at Texas is like an energy island. You don't buy from anybody, you don't sell it to anybody. So power rates are going up because thanks to these environmental things and all that, they're shutting down all these coal plants and stuff like that. So I can go on and on and on and on. So expenses are growing at a much higher clip than the income, right? And when you couple that with where you're not getting that 1% rent anymore, I'm not saying you can't buy B and C anymore, but you got to be like right 3 times over. You got to be really, really, really right to make it in this climate, at this pricing, at this expense environment. You see what I'm saying? A lot changed in 3-4 years. So that's why we are going to development, and we're not going to limit ourselves to just multifamily. We are actually in 3 projects right now. The project where we are much further along is this 156 units construction in Princeton on Highway 380. And we are building a 65,000 square feet retail, specialty retail, not your strip mall kind of thing. Think this is, we called it Academics in Full Share, Texas, right next to Katy. So this is 65,000 square feet. This is to cater to reach to the affluent communities in the 10-mile radius over there. They got nothing to do over there, but this particular thing is geared towards them. So they'll have a table tennis federation leasing some space, swimming federation leasing some space, tutoring services, daycare services. So this is more geared towards that affluent communities there, but it's not like your AT&T store kind of retail, right? So that's another project. We just acquired the land. We're in the process of acquiring the land near our Galleria Mall in Dallas to build another 250 to 300 units over there. So we got our hands into development. And the reason why we are doing that is, if you see, there is a tremendous shift in the millennials and Generation Z mindset about home ownership. Nobody's running around, oh, you know what, I got to have the American dream, and that means I got to go at home. That's not there anymore, right? So that's why we're doing really well in the apartment industry, and especially given the inward migration that is happening into the cities, and you coupled with the mindset of this younger generations, where you have a tremendous demand for this construction, right? I mean, a brand new product, especially if you make, let's say, $75,000, you're single. You don't want to go live in a C-class property. I'm not saying nobody does it, but majority of the people doesn't. American culture is not a saving culture, right? And I used to laugh when I see that in the movies where the parents say, oh, what do you say? You always save 10% of your salary. 10%? What you can do with 10%? Asian mentality is more like 50% or 60% or whatever you can get away with. Save. So you invest money, make more money, that kind of thing. So this generation, especially the younger generation that we have in America, right? So they, as long as the economy is good, they'll spend. They want nice stuff. They want that yoga studio, that coffee machine there, the amenities I'm talking about. So there is definitely a demand for that if you're in the right place. Of course, if you're in the middle of nowhere outside and there's really nothing much. But we have a different business plan for that. So it's 2 trains of thought here. 1, location. Go where a dot railway station is. Go where the jobs are. Go where the shopping is, that kind of thing, right? So this project that we are doing near Dallas Galleria, so that would be that, right? But the property that we are doing in Princeton, it's a totally different mindset. It's the opposite of that. So these are our good old families who got 2 kids. They want to buy a home, but they can't, but they still want access to Collin County schools, that services and all that, right? So why we chose Princeton is it's just 7 minutes on that Highway 380 from McKinney, where the rents are reaching $2 a foot. $2 a foot. And we are providing the same quality right opposite Princeton High School at $1.48. That's 27% discount, right? So for somebody who's paying $1,000 rent, nobody's paying $1,000 rent in McKinney. It's much, much high. But let's say if they're paying $1,000 rent, they can have the same thing here for $730. That's $270 savings, right? So that is a sound business plan. Again, cost-conscious people who have kids, want access to the nice schools, they're going to come and live in this thing. So the dollar per foot that we're going to spend will vary quite a bit between these two business plans. But there, I see that, there is a demand for that kind of product because it's new. Everybody wants that. The pension funds want it. Institutions want to have it. Life insurance companies wanted to put it on their portfolio. And then we have these awesome hard loans where you can put a 40-year AM at 2% interest rate. So if you look at this new product, there is not many headwinds at this time as BNC has, all those other things that I described. So that's reason why we went into the development and want to continue that into the future.
So are you looking to flip these? Like you mentioned the hedge funds or the big REITs. Are you looking to develop these, get them filled up, and then sell them to like an insurance company?
So that's the beauty about development, right? So look at our 12 deals that we have done with BNC. Same exact, right? BNC class, value add. So you buy it with a Fannie or a Freddie loan, and then you raise some money with CapEx money. You're gonna change the floor. Everybody's doing the same exact thing, right? You got a nice two-tone paint, floor, maybe appliances, a backsplash, same exact thing. Boring, but very important on execution though. It's not as easy as it sounded boring, but it's the same thing, right? And also you need all the money up front so that you can purchase and you can escrow the CapEx funds and things like that, right? Pretty boring. But when you look at development, it's a whole different animal, right? So there is no one way to do things. I recently saw a project in Austin where they want to acquire some 200 acres and want to put a lagoon in it. A lagoon. They're going to install like a beach kind of a thing in Texas, right, in Austin. And they're going to chop up into the pieces, get it zoned, whatever it should be like, okay, this part is multifamily, this part is, retail or whatever. And they're going to cut it into pieces and sell it. And that's nobody ain't building anything there, right? So that's one way to do this. The other way is to actually, build, put people in it, get it evaluated, sell it, and move on. And the other way to do it is actually build, refinance it into a hard loan, and keep it on your portfolio, refinance and take your capital out and just enjoy the gravy for the rest of your life. So there's so much variation that you have, and we're still new to commit to one process, right? I am not so naive to think that, just because we're doing 3 projects, I know everything about development. No. I mean, if you have that mindset, we won't go much far. So we are very open on all these 3 projects at each stage. After entitlement, if somebody reaches to us and say, hey, you know what, can you sell that land to me? And I'm going to make sure that you get 20-30% profit. Sure, take it, right? Why not? Or if somebody offers us a good price after we completed the project and actually leased up, sure, why not, right? So we're going to play it by the ear. But as of right now, the default plan is to buy and hold it, not to sell it off.
Got it. Awesome. Before you mentioned, the location. So what are some of the things that you look for in markets that may be unique to your group as far as like KPIs? And everybody looks at population growth, job growth, and stuff like that. Is there any other KPIs that you try to zone in on that you think is a certain indicator that maybe other people aren't looking at?
Again, so what you said can help you to locate a market. Yes, right? You look at the job growth and population growth, and also not something that you can quantify and look at in a coastal report is the business-friendly laws, right? So you got to keep up with the laws. So let's look at California, right? So they want retail people to be able to break their leases. I mean, you know how retail goes, right? I mean, that's a death sentence for the landlord there, right? So because of the COVID, apparently they're saying that all the retail people can push the pain onto the landlord and they walk away scot-free. What the hell, right? So second thing is that they want to pass a bill where they instantaneously reduce everybody's rents by 25%. Well, is my mortgage getting 25% lower? No, right? So when that kind of craziness is there, I stay away with it because you cannot fight state. You want state on your side, right? So that's why I have a very limited set of states that I want to operate in, but they do vary all the way from let's say Tennessee all the way to Arizona, but landlord friendly. And then you look at this job growth, population growth, and things like that, and the business friendliness like I explained. But then once you pick the market, now you got to hone in on what is it? Who's the avatar of a tenant that's going to lease from you? Put yourself in their shoes and see what do they want in this apartment complex? Or how much are they willing to pay? What is the supply? That's another thing. Again, I'm not too much concerned that, okay, Dallas last year generated 30,000 units. Well, I'm not freaked out by it because we brought in 100,000 people too, right? So even if you put 3 people in each of these units, I mean, you're okay. There's not a glut which is building there. In the short term, you'll have a little bit of softness in the leasing and the rents that you can command and push. But on the long term, the prospects are really, really good for Dallas, for Austin. And another favorite market, which one day my dream is to break into this market, is Utah, right? Utah. It looks like a big state, but you have mountains on the east side of it, and you have a lake on the west side, and you have this narrow strip of land along the highway where you can build. And again, what do we know? Supply demand, right? Where there is low supply, demand will be more. And also, it's a big old boys club. It's hard to break into that market. And Nashville, Tennessee, that's another market, right? Niche market kind of thing. So I look for these kind of where desirableness. So it's a mix of things, right? The desirability of the product, the business friendliness, the typical KPIs, right? The job growth, the population growth, and everything. And then that exact locality on who will rent from me, and I want to build my product and my project to cater to its particular set of tenants.
Yeah, that's awesome with the business friendly laws, and I've always had it's on our checklist of going into a new market. Like look up the landlord tenant laws, look up what's the local policy. But this COVID-19 has really opened my eyes to how important that is, because we have a portfolio in Michigan and we have a portfolio in Texas that are around the same size, same class, same vintage, same demographic of resident, and they couldn't be performing further apart. The Michigan, their policy is saying don't pay your rent, don't worry about your landlord, the governor will protect you, all this stuff. And Texas is they barely even closed. Right? They're only essential workers, but then everybody's essential, everybody's going back to work. Yeah. So our collections rate, our communications with the residents, it's couldn't be more night and day. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm much more attuned to that now going forward, and I'm glad that we've had that experience of being in a landlord friendly or business friendly market and a tenant friendly market. That way, I have that experience now of this is how bad it can get if you stay into those markets like California and stuff like that.
And absolutely, that is true when you're dealing with a B and C class product, right? I mean, you got government on your side, the state on your side when you're dealing with that class of product and that class of tenants, because there's so many things which comes into the play: the crime, the ability to pay, the intent to pay. So many things come into the play, and you better have state on your side. Let's see, if you go into the Michigan, operate a Class A apartment, probably you won't have that same pay, because the people who pay you $1,500 for a small studio apartment, they care about their credit history, right? So they'll most probably will try their level best to pay you, right? So you won't feel that pain a whole lot as you go up and up. And that's why there are still a lot of market.
All right. So how has your underwriting changed moving forward? Right now, we're recording this on June 20th, 2020. We're just coming out of this first wave of coronavirus. So people are already talking about a second wave in the fall. Hopefully that doesn't happen. So going forward in your new development or in your current properties, how are you adjusting your underwriting to protect your investors' capital and reach your returns?
Absolutely. So as of right now, we are looking and we are underwriting B and C class apartments, but there's nothing compelling that we are seeing, right? But we have changed our underwriting quite a bit. So basically, I'm not speaking. It's underwriting is mostly locality specific, right? The market specific. So for Dallas market, we are underwriting a no rent growth for the year of 2020, And from 2021, we are underwriting about 2%. Usually we underwrite whatever the pro forma adjustment is for the first year. And then from second year onwards, we underwrite about 3%. That's what we've done all these years. But now we reduced it to 2% from 2021, but for 2020, it's 0, right? Speaking about expenses, you got to understand what's going on. I mean, sitting outside Dallas market, you won't be privy to this detail unless you talk to some tax adjuster or somebody in the market, right? But what's happening is until 2015, 2016, Dallas and Tarrant County, right? Tarrant County is the county for Fort Worth, where Fort Worth is. So these two counties were so mellow. You pay something $100,000, they'll tax you on $60,000 or maybe even $50,000. They're your friend, right? No big deal. But now everybody's racing towards that full 100%. Tarrant County made a big strides back in 2016-17. So they started using CBRE cap rates. They're not some cap rates they were using from before. They were using CBRE published cap rates and increased valuations quite a bit. And Dallas started doing that starting 2020. So we adjusted to that. So now we underwrite to 100%. And not sure if, of course, you own in Dallas. You own in Texas, and you know how it is. We don't have state income tax, so that means we have much higher property tax because these local bodies in the state has to get quite a bit of revenue. Especially ISD, the schools run on our property taxes, and they're getting pretty serious, right? So we adjusted to that. So we underwrite to 100%. 100% of the property value for the taxes. Insurance, we adjusted. We used to underwrite at 400, 450 mid last year to late last year. Now we are underwriting to 600. So when you put all these things, I mean, your upside is limited, but your expenses are just going quite a bit up. Nothing is working. Well, think about it. What should happen now? Well, does that mean that until the end of the time, no more deals will happen? Of course they will happen. So the thing which has to give up is the pricing. The pricing hasn't come down yet. And even I have a few properties that I can sell, but I don't want to sell now because not at a discount, right? So the pricing hasn't come down yet. And also we'll see some distressed assets coming out as well. And it takes some time. The reason is that, once the stock market, everything starts at stock market. I mean, that's my mindset, right? I mean, that's how I understand how things work. So once the stock markets get hit, the companies will adjust their capex, right? That they're spending, and they'll lay off people and things like that. And these are somebody's tenants or, somebody's, people living in the houses. They cannot pay rents no more. They cannot pay the mortgages, so forth. Then those landlords will go work with their lenders to see if they can get an extension or a loan modification, things like that. And after everything, if it still doesn't work, then it becomes officially distressed, end up as an REO. So a lot of chain events has to happen in order for you to see a distressed asset out there as well. So I'm not holding my breath on distressed assets anytime soon. It'll at least take a year, if not more, to see some distressed assets. But the product that I'm seeing outside right now, I'm in a wait and see kind of a mode right now. So second wave, I mean, I believe that there will be a second wave. But what I need to, and I'm not worried about it, right? I mean, the virus is here to stay is what I believe until we have a vaccine, which we are years away. But what I'm slightly worried about is how these local bodies will react to that, right? So if you see the Texas governor refuses to give a mask, that requiring everybody to use a mask, but rather he allowed local bodies to impose that rule on the businesses. So businesses are requiring its customers to wear a mask, otherwise you won't get the service, right? So they're doing it in a roundabout way. Now, if you apply the same thing to rents and all that, so what is there to say where Dallas County cannot say tenants that, hey, you know what, we're going to hold evictions for the foreseeable future. We don't know when we'll open the eviction court. If that happens, it's a big deal, right? So not knowing all these things, it's just too much flux, too fluid of a situation as far as I'm going. So unless I see a screaming deal, existing properties, I won't be pulling trigger on that. So I changed my underwriting, and I really need to see a compelling rule for me to get into a new deal in the year of 2020, not knowing about the second wave, how the local bodies react to that, what is this true impact of all the damage has already been done on the market. So there's so many things that we need to see before I get confident to write a little bit aggressively again.
Awesome. That's awesome. So you mentioned a lot about expenses. So one of my biggest things is going in and looking for inefficient operations and reducing expenses. That's where I get, that big NOI bump for a lot of our business plan. Do you have like a favorite, thing that you look for when you're looking at, T12s or moving to a property where this is the first thing we do every time to get a nice, NOI bump from decreasing expenses or increasing income as well?
Sure. I mean, see, all these days when things are on our side and, let's say, I take a can of paint and paint that reserved parking 10 spots, ask somebody to pay $30 a unit. Well, they pay. You put a patio, you spend $1,200, ask $50 more, they pay. And this is all after the core of the value add that we typically do, right? So all the easy pickings are gone, right? And then you can keep on doing that. I mean, I haven't done valet trash service at any property, but there are properties where people successfully done that. I have done it on insurance where I make a little bit of money on the insurance that I sell to the my tenants to protect me and them, right? So all the easy things are gone. Now you have to look at the hard things, right? So obviously you have to control the expenses. And let me give you an example. So there is a 300-unit property that we own. It's a chiller property. It always performed well. We always did better than our pro forma. So it has high water bill because you have chiller, right, the evaporation, and then you have some leaks in the winter month and all that. So what right now I'm looking at is, well, I don't want to raise rents and risk reducing my occupancy at this time, right? Not a time, right? So, but my expenses are increasing. So what I got to do? So I'm actually planning a much bigger value add at this late stage. I mean, we own the property more than 3.5 years at this point, right? So I want to go to bank, my lender, and ask for a supplemental loan so that I can fund a chiller to HVAC conversion with individual meters. So let's see what it does. So it saves about $300,000 in water bill. That's about $28,000 a month in water bill. So you even give a 7 cap and think about it, right? I mean, it's going to work a whole lot more, like $4 million, north of $4 million. And a job like that will actually cost you something like $10,000 a unit. But there are programs like Encore. Right now, after COVID, they're really looking for projects, right? Because Encore, who is our power distribution company, has set aside some money every year to actually do green stuff so that they can reduce the stress on their grid, right? So as part of that, now they're looking for projects, and I want to capitalize on that. And I think I can do that project at $5,500 a door and not $10,000 a door, because other $4,500 will come as a rebate from Encore, right? So if I can pull this off, what will happen is that immediate bump in my NOI, and the cap rate gets compressed at least by 50 basis points on the asset itself, because until yesterday it was a chiller property. Today it's a individual HVACs with individual meters. So, different kind of tenants. You can attract better tenants because they can control their own AC. A lot of good things can happen. So these are tough ones. It's not easy, right? To getting so much coordination. And then you got to think of, you put a multi-year power contract. What happens to them? Let's say suddenly I say that, no more chiller, and in 3 months we can do this to convert a 300-unit property into individual HVACs. Then what happens to the power contract I send? Will they come looking for me asking $1 million for breaking the contract? So there's several things that you have to work and coordinate to pull off something like this. So I myself is looking at tough items, because all the easy pickings are gone. We already pulled them. So now I want to go after the really big ones to get them done, so that I can keep up with these growing expenses where I don't have any control. Like insurance, I cannot control that. Tax, I can protest it. I protest every property every year diligently, but still, I cannot control it fully, right? So the things I don't have control on, I don't worry too much about, even though I use professionals to shop for a good insurance policy, and I use professionals to fight my taxes every year. I do that, but that's just a limited control. But the things that we can control is what we have to go after, right? Things that you have to see is that you have to reduce your vendor dependency. No longer is the case where you have to turn that unit in 2 days, paying $1,500 to $2,000 a vendor to get it make ready. I'm not talking about floor, that's still a vendor item. I'm not talking about resurfacing, that's still a vendor item. But everything else, like the paint, make ready, right? Fix that hole, patch that hole, change that fan, these kind of things, right? It costs quite a bit of money, and you have to reduce that. That's a big expense drain if you can reduce that. And then you got to look at how I can keep the tenant there. And don't start like a week before their lease expires. Start 3 months before. And the very first call to them, don't say anything about renewing lease. Ask them, how are you doing? Is there any way that I can do to improve your stay here? And then start, rolling in the lease renewal. And basically, we were okay at 50% turnover rate every year on a C-class property, but now we got to be at 75, at least 75, right, in order to keep up with what all going. So these are a few things that we are working on to take care of our existing properties.
That's a lot of a few things. I took notes just for our own program because our El Paso property is a chiller property as well. And we were tossing around, okay, we're going to go through the mini splits. Are we going to go through full HVAC? One thing I didn't factor was water savings from going that. I was thinking a lot about the energy or a lot about the offering those units as a premium, because we're thinking about doing maybe 30% or 50% of the units as HVAC and offering those as premium units for an upcharge. But never once did I think about, because I'm not used to chillers, or I'm not an expert at them, but the water savings of it didn't even cross my mind. So we're going to go back and try to recalculate, see if we can sway that decision more toward it once we factor in the water savings.
Absolutely. See, following are the things you have to factor in, right? When you say chiller, nobody put your chiller in 80s, right? It's very highly unlikely that somebody put a chiller in 80s. So you're talking about 60s, 70s product here. So you have to factor in evaporation, right? The evaporation which happens in the summer, the cooling tower and the whole 9 yards. The leaks, right? The water maintenance cost. Every single month you have to maintain that water, right? And then you have to worry about when it leaks, it's not just regular water which is leaking. It leaks cold water, right? Chilled water. So you're using some energy because the fact of the matter that the water itself is chilled. And same thing with hot water in the winter, right? When the freeze happens, El Paso probably doesn't get that cold, but in Dallas it gets cold enough where it put pressure on these pipes. So and the plumbing costs, and when the leak happens, it knocks off a few things, and you have to call somebody to put these things back on. And when there is a storm in the area, it knocks off certain fuses, and you have to call somebody. If you factor all in this cost, I'm telling you, almost every scenario where you have a chiller, it makes sense to replace it with individual HVACs, but don't go to that just 5-yard line and stop there. You got to go ahead and put that individual meter so that you give full control to people. How much ever they want to pay, they'll use it. And if they don't want to pay, they'll put it on 76. If they can't live without cold weather, they'll lower it down. So give that independence. That way you can attract good tenants. I don't know, just ask yourself, would you give up the independence or the freedom to control your own thermostat? None of us wouldn't. I don't think we would, right? So that's what happens, right? The people who are willing to live in chiller properties obviously are willing to give up that freedom so that they can save some money, right? So that means it impacts the quality of tenant, their ability to pay, especially in tough times like this thing. But if you put that individual meter, let them control their own HVAC machine, a good tenant will come up.
Nice. That's gold. That made this whole call worth it right there. Or over to you, Mac, for the fire round.
Yeah, Venkat, I feel like we could talk about this all day, but we've already taken about an hour of your time. So I'm going to jump into the fire round and just shoot some questions your way. You can answer them as long or short as you want, and we'll knock them out. What is the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad Poor Dad?
So I read this. I read this one book called The One Thing. I forgot the author's name, but it's The One Thing. It shows the
Gary
importance
Keller.
of not doing. I'm sorry?
It's Gary Keller.
There you go. That's the guy. I'm really bad with names. But anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed this particular book because it tells you the importance of not doing multitasking and not get bogged up with so many misconceived notions like work-life balance. I mean, it's a pretty intelligent book, and I really enjoyed that, and I recommend to everyone.
Excellent. What is your superpower?
Well, my superpower is to locate and find people who are best in what they do, pull them together, and get stuff done.
That's a great superpower. With almost 3,000 units, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned along your journey through multifamily?
My biggest lesson was if I can go back and do it all over again, I would start a self-management company. Doesn't mean that I'm going to do the management myself as a mom and pop company, but definitely I would have started a self-management, a management company when I'm about 500 unit strength, right? That's when it started to make sense. Don't have to make much money off that, but I would have enjoyed a lot more control on the properties, what goes on my properties if I self-manage. I always regretted that decision that I didn't do that. Now it's hard.
For the busy working professional who's working towards financial freedom, what advice do you have?
This is what I would say, right? Look, at the end of the day, you got to be happy with whatever you're doing. If going 9-to-5 job, I'm not going to alienate it. I loved my job, and people loved me over there. They took care of me. I was so sick to my stomach when I'm resigning at my Bank of America job. And my wife works for bank as well, and she loves her job. So I'm not going to sit here and say that 9-to-5 is bullshit. I mean, everybody should quit that. No, that's not what I'm saying. If you're not happy in that area, if you are changing who you are just so that you can keep the job, right? To appease people, doing something that you don't like, don't be that guy or girl. Look elsewhere, and real estate is definitely one of them as a top way to do that. It's so many friendly people will help you to achieve your dreams of the financial independence. So that's what I would say. Start with that mindset. If you're happy, you're good, right? You're good, but still doesn't hurt to passively invest in other people's thing. I don't know where you're going to get these kind of results that real estate is consistently producing. So do that. But if you're not happy with your 9-to-5 or corporate job, go look for that financial independence. Have open mind, believe in it, believe in yourself, and you can achieve it.
That's great advice. Do you have a request for our audience, and how can people reach out to you?
So your audience can learn more about me and my partner Ramana by visiting our Raven Multifamily website. It's Raven, RAVENMF, MF as in multifamily, RAVENMF.com. And they can email me at Venkat at ravenmultifamily.com, VENKAT at ravenmultifamily.com, or they can call me at 281-727-9238.
Excellent, Venkat. Well, it was awesome talking with you today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Likewise.
Thank you for attending, spending your Saturday morning with us. And this is going to be a great show, and I'm going to go back and listen to it myself and look at my notes.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks,
We'll talk
guys.
to you soon, Venkat. Bye.
Bye.
I told you, Matt, I told you that Venkat would not disappoint us. This was going to be outstanding. I got 2 full pages of notes that we took on here. So just some of the things to recap is, one of the big things was the skills of being marketable. When he went through that 2008, the Great Recession, and he saw all these people that supposedly did everything in their lives right. They did everything by the book. They went to school, got a degree, learned a skill, went and got a job at a good firm, 20, 30 years, and then just to be cut without anything to back them up. No skills to fall on, no secondary income streams to fall on, and how earth-shattering that was for him and his paradigm, and how he redirected and realized that he needs to have some passive income for himself and his family. So that was awesome. And then, I already recapped it in the show, but you should never stop learning. You should never stop adapting, looking to see what the market needs so you can fill the needs of the market. Never stop improving yourself, because as we know, with the way that technology is advancing, you and your job can be obsolete very, very quickly. So you always have to be making yourself better and more marketable and looking for ways to build passive streams of income. And he arrived at multifamily the same way we did, because it is the best asset class out there. I also liked his points on finding partners, and I think that is valuable to recap that as well, where he didn't really focus on what he was weak at and strengthening his weaknesses. He found a partner that complemented him. So together they can compensate for each other's weaknesses and allow their strengths to flourish with the things that they like doing, the things that they're good at. I don't think a lot of teams really focus on that intentionally when they're going into partnerships or going into team building. And I think that's an absolute must when you're building performing and effective teams. One of the things I also took note of was how strong Venkat values his fiduciary responsibility. And when he talked about leaving, him and his partner leaving their jobs in 2018, it wasn't so much that they had reached a milestone, at least this is how I took it, which was, whatever the financial freedom was, or their financial independence number was. It was, they realized that they were controlling so much of their investors' money that they wanted to give 100% of their attention to being a fiduciary, to making sure that their investors were protected and they were making the right decisions because they had all of their attention focused on the company, the business, the portfolio, and growing it, rather than what a lot of people do is they build a portfolio on one side and then their attention split with their W-2 job and then their investing side. And a lot of times we have to start out like that. We have to start somewhere. But you get to a point where if your portfolio is doing well and your companies are doing well, you should make that decision to transition because you are a fiduciary. Your investors have given you a lot of times their entire retirement accounts to grow and protect. And that's a task that no one should ever take lightly. So I picked up on that when he was giving his explanation, and I took note of it, that fiduciary responsibility should always be at the forefront of your mind when you're a deal sponsor. Some other things I took was the expense, the decision from going from the BC class, traditional value add, which a lot of people get into this industry doing, and going to ground up construction and developing. Some of his thought process, the expenses are growing, but the rent's not keeping pace, and the cap rate compression along with that. So all these different market forces got him and his team to start looking at development versus staying in the B and C class right now. He didn't say he was over B and C class forever. He said right now he's seeing these things in this market, and he's going to switch over to the new development because that's where the opportunity is that his team has identified. And then also the awesome notes we took on the increasing income and decreasing expenses on his market or in his properties, going from chillers to HVAC, doing the reserve parking, trash valet, things like that. Those are awesome little tips, and I'm going to do a video on this. I wrote it down here, and what's called a pick chart. It's something that people in process improvement do and project management do. It's a matrix that helps you identify all the possible opportunities and the risk versus reward, or the reward versus how hard it is to implement. And it really helps you strategize and figure out where the low-hanging fruit are and how to prioritize these different value-add projects or income producing projects or expense decreasing projects. And so I'm going to do a separate video on that, and it's going to be awesome, and I'll post it up as well. But that's all I have for the golden nuggets. I said I took 2 pages of notes, and I only went through about half of them in this recap. So what do we got for us, Matt?
All right, guys, if you found value in today's podcast, please subscribe so you can get the latest episodes. We'd love it if you'd give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. And if you know anyone who might resonate with today's podcast, please share this episode with them. To connect with like-minded investors, join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and More. And if you're interested in connecting with us, go to tricityequity.com to learn more. See you next time.
All right. See you, Matt.
See you.